Welcome to screencast number 1 for Unit 9, Lesson 1, and we're talking about ecosystem ecology. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the relationships that occur within an ecosystem. So let's get started on that. I'm on page 494. What are the parts of an ecosystem? Wherever there are organisms such as animals or plants, there are ecosystems. An ecosystem is a community of species and their non-living environment. Living and non-living things interact constantly in an ecosystem. Ecology is the study of organisms' interactions with each other and with their environment. An ecosystem can be really large or really small. The tundra ecosystem shown here in the picture is a very large ecosystem. But you can also have a very small ecosystem, such as a rotting log in a forest, for example. Okay, so an ecosystem is a community of species and their non-living environment. So basically, an ecosystem is made up of living parts and non-living parts. So let's talk about the non-living parts first. The non-living parts of an ecosystem are called abiotic factors. Water, air, soil, sunlight, and temperature are all abiotic factors. Okay? These are all things that animals and plants need to survive, but abiotic factors themselves are not living. Okay? There are several examples in the reading. Sunlight can affect how plants grow. Water temperature and oxygen levels can affect things growing in lakes and fish and, all sorts of things. But the parts of an ecosystem that are non-living are called abiotic factors. Water, soil, sunlight, temperature, pH means how acidic or basic something is, water pressure, atmospheric pressure, all of those things that affect an environment but are not themselves live things, okay? Abiotic factors. On page 495, we talk about the living parts of the ecosystem, and those are called biotic factors. Okay, biotic factors are the living things in an ecosystem and their interactions. Okay, so for instance, in the picture, you've got caribou and mosses. Both are living things. One is a plant, one is an animal, but they're both living things in the tundra ecosystem that's pictured. Okay? Biotic factors in an ecosystem can change over time. And biotic factors in an ecosystem often do change with the seasons. Okay? All right, if you'll look on page 495, let me slide this over a little bit. There is a place for you to categorize. So list the biotic and abiotic factors in this ecosystem. So the ecosystem they're talking about is the Arctic tundra ecosystem that you see. Biotic factors would be living things such as the moose or the caribou, the mosses and the other plants that are around them. There's some little flowers here and there. Those are all biotic because they're living. Abiotic factors in this ecosystem would be the rocks, the soil, the amount of sunlight that the ecosystem is getting, the available water, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so make sure that you've listed both some biotic and abiotic factors in this particular ecosystem. All right, I'm now on page 496. What are the levels of organization in an ecosystem? Well, the reading gives you kind of an example to follow, and it's, I think, a pretty good one. It says you are an individual, one person, who's part of a class, and that class is part of a grade in school. So, for instance, you as one person might be in second period science class. So that's the class that you're in. It's a little bit bigger than just you, the individual. But then you're also part of the 8th grade. But then the 8th grade is part of Lexington Middle School, that kind of thing. Okay? So individual, class, grade, and school are all terms that represent different levels of organization, from smallest to biggest in this case. In a similar way, ecosystems also have different levels of organization. An individual is one organism in an ecosystem. It's the smallest level of organization in an ecosystem. Okay. Competition is something that happens when two or more individuals, two or more organisms, try to get the same resource. Okay, a resource is something that is needed by individuals in an ecosystem. It can be food, it can be living space, it can be all sorts of things. All right, a population is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same area. So in this particular ecosystem, you might talk about the population of prairie dogs because there are many prairie dogs. One prairie dog is an individual, but all of the prairie dogs living in that area is a population of prairie dogs. Okay? So all the prairie dogs in this particular prairie make up one population. All the pronghorns in this ecosystem make up a different population because they're a different species. The blue stem grasses in this prairie make up another population because that's a species of grass. So all of the individuals of a particular species make up a population. And then a community is made up of all the populations of different species that live in the same area. Community is the largest level of organization in an ecosystem. Okay? Every ecosystem has different species in its community, and these species compete for a limited number of resources. Okay? If resources decrease, populations in a community may also decrease in number or even leave the community altogether if there's not enough to go around. Okay. Before I cover any of the rest of the information in Lesson 1, what I want you to do is I want you to, other than doing the highlighting that I did, stop before you go to screencast number 2 and go to the back of your lesson and add these notes from the pages that I have covered. And we'll add to it as we get done with the other screencasts. So an ecosystem is all the plants and animals, basically all of the organisms plus their non-living environment. So parts of the ecosystem basically are divided into living parts and non-living parts. Living factors are biotic factors. They can be things like plants, algae, animals, fungi, bacteria, anything that's living. And then the other part of the ecosystem is the abiotic or non-living factors. They can be water, air, soil, sunlight, pH, meaning how acidic or basic is something like water. Temperature, you can add air pressure, water pressure. Those are all things that affect the ecosystem but are not living parts of the ecosystem. And then we have the levels of organization in an ecosystem from smallest to biggest. You have the individual, which is one organism. Many individuals make up a population. Okay, that would be many individuals of the same species. And then many populations make up a community. And the community is the largest level of organization in an ecosystem. So make sure you jot that down before you move on to screencast number 2.